Good morning, students. Today we are going to learn about factory planning. So, how do you define factory planning? First of all, factory planning describes a multifaceted range of tasks. It starts as the word factory and planning with the design of completely new production location. It is the predictive design of the factories, comprising of the analysis, setting of objectives, determination of functions, dimensioning, structuring, integration, and design of factories as a system, including their subsystems, elements, substructures, and processes. Factory planning comprises the planning and dimensioning of industrial production facilities as well as the monitoring of realization until the production is started. So factory planning is a medium to long-term process focusing on the physical properties needed for the facility to fulfill its operation or function and includes specification of equipment. It also refers both to the re-establishment of a factory operation as well as the expansion or modification of the existing operation. Because of the high complexity of a factory operation, factory planning includes architecture, building planning, production plant planning, plant layout planning, personnel planning, as well as factory organization tasks. It is thus essentially concerned with the replanning or modification of a factory operation. So, what do we produce in the factories? The products. How you are going to select a product, what you are going to produce. For that, you need to design a product. Product design is to create a new product that is to be sold by a business to its customers. Product concept is the understanding of the dynamics of the product in order to showcase the best qualities and maximum features of the product. A product selection is to select the product which could help in reaping profits by satisfying the customer's requirements. But why do we need to do the factory planning? It is required for new construction or for expansion or for location of the production system. These are also the most frequent mentioned reasons for placing factory planning on the agenda. That is why the subject has become a topic of explicit interest in the first place. In such phases of radically perceptible change, the discussion also tends to revolve around extraordinarily high investment sums. This brings factory planning into the focus of the company's management. It often becomes a separate project in its own right and possibly even a huge one. And this can usually only be managed with external assistance. All this leads to the widespread perception that factory planning itself should always be viewed as a subject or project, and that is the only seldom necessary to undertake such efforts. But even that management science has regularly introduced new factory concepts over the past decades, Along with the required models and methods, most enterprises have so far remained quite literally unable to cast off their old skin. The dream of a production facility built on a greenfield site and designed in accordance with all the latest knowledge often remains an economically unrealistic proposition for years or even decades. Radical modifications or extensions are very rarely the rule. Now, product selection is done. Then is what are the characteristics? Why do we need factory planning? The features. First is for smooth flow of production. Obviously, whenever a firm is going to manufacture the products, they assume that there should be a flow and continuous flow of production of goods that are being produced by the manufacturing concerns. Then is to maximum utilization of available space. That means every firm has a limited amount of space and that needs to be used optimally. For that, they need to plan out the plant layout. There is facilities, the movement of men, material, machines, etc. That means how men are going to work. What methods are going to be used for the production of goods and services? That needs to be taken into consideration. For that, factory planning is really very important. Then involves minimum handling. If the workers are going to keep on handling the materials for a long period of time, they are going to be lethargic, which would affect the efficiency of their tasks. So the planning should be like that. There should be minimum handling of materials and the machines. Then provides better working conditions. When the workers are going to get better working conditions, they would be satisfied with the ambience of the environment of the workplace. Then they are going to be satisfied internally, due to which the production efficiency would automatically get increased. Flexibility, for creating flexibilities. Location of stores, where the stores are there, how with minimum cost they can provide materials to the stores. For that, it needs a planning for the setup of the factories. Then facilitates supervision and control. Then what are the objectives for factory planning? First is to streamline flow of materials through the plant. That means how the materials are going to be flowed down in a streamlined manner. That needs to be taken into consideration. For that, factory planning is the most important way. Second is to minimize the material handling. Then facilitates manufacturing progress by maintaining balance in the processes. Maintain flexibility of arrangements and of operations. Maintaining higher turnover of in-process inventories. Effective utilization of men, equipment and space. Increase employees' morale. Minimize the interference from machines. Reduce hazards affecting employees. And hold down investment, that is, keep investment at a lower level in equipment. The next topic would be factors affecting the plant location. There are many factors which affects the location of the plant by choosing them, like availability of raw materials, availability of labor, proximity to the markets, transportation facilities, powers, site and services, finances, natural and climatic considerations, personal factors, strategic consideration, external economies and miscellaneous. Or more to talk about the law and order situations. infrastructure facilities, good industrial relations, skilled workforce, investor-friendly attitude, market proximity, easy availability of raw materials to meet the safety requirements, availability and cost of land, suitability of land, climate conditions, and so on. Let us discuss them in detail. First is availability of raw material. In determining the location of an industry, nearness to the sources of raw material is of vital importance. Nearness to the sources of raw material reduces the cost of production of the industry. For most of the major industries, the cost of raw materials forms the bulk of the total cost. Therefore, most of the agro-based and forest-based industries are located in the vicinity of the sources of raw material supply. Next is availability of labor. Adequate supply of cheap and skilled labor is necessary for the industry. The attraction of industry towards labor centers depends on the ratio of the labor cost to the total cost of production, which Weber calls labor cost of index. The availability of skilled labor in the interior parts of the Bombay region was one of the factors responsible for the initial concentration of the cotton textile industry in the region. Next is proximity to the markets. Access to markets is one of the important factors affecting location of industries that the entrepreneurs must take into consideration. Industries producing perishable or bulky commodities which cannot be transported over long distances are generally located in the close proximity to the markets. Industries located near the markets could be able to read or reduce the cost of transport in distributing the finished product, as in the case of bread and bakery, ice, tins, can manufacturing, etc. Accessibility of markets is more important in the case of industries manufacturing consumer goods rather than the producer goods. Then the next factor that is going to affect the plant location decision is transport facility. Transport facilities generally influence the location of industry. Transportation with these three modes, that is the water, road and rail, collectively plays an important role. So the junction points of waterways, roadways and railways become humming centers of the industrial activity. Further, the modes and rates of transport and transport policy of the government considerably affect the location of industrial units. The heavy concentration of the cotton textile industry in Bombay has been due to the cheap and excellent transportation network, both in regard to raw materials and the markets. Then the next factor is power. Another influencing factor for the location of an industry is the availability of cheap power. Water, wind, coal, gas, oil and electricity are the chief sources of power. Both water and wind power was widely sought as sources of power supply before the invention of the steam engine. During the 19th century, nearness to coal fields became the principal locating influence on the setting up of new industries, particularly for heavy industries. With the introduction of other sources of power like electricity, gas, oil, etc., the power factor became more flexible, leading to dispersal and decentralization of industries. The next factor that affects the decision of plant location is the site and services. The existence of public utility services, the cheapness of the value of site, amenities attached to a particular site like the level of ground, the nature of vegetation, and the location of allied activities influence the location of an industry to a certain extent. The government has classified some areas as backward areas where the entrepreneurs would be granted various incentives like subsidies or provision of finance at a concessional rate or supply of power at cheaper rates and provision of education and training facilities. Some entrepreneurs induced by such incentives may come forward to locate their units in such areas. Next is finance. It is required for setting up of industry, for its running, and also at the time of expansion. The availability of capital at cheap rates of interest and inadequate amount is a dominating factor influencing industrial location. Like for example, a review of the locational history of the Indian cotton textile industry indicates that the concentration of the industry in and around Bombay in the early days was mainly due to the presence of rich and enterprising Parsi and Bhatia merchants who supplied vast financial resources. Next is natural and climatic considerations. Natural and climatic considerations include the level of the ground, the topography of a region, water facilities, drainage facilities, disposal of waste products, etc. These factors sometimes influence the location of industries. For instance, in the case of cotton textile industry, the humid climate provides an added advantage since the frequency of yarn breakage is low. The humid climate of Bombay in India and Manchester in Britain offered great scope for the development of cotton textile industry in those centers. Next is personal factors. In deciding the location of industrial units, sometimes an entrepreneur may have personal preferences and prejudices against certain localities. For example, Mr. Ford started to manufacture motor cars in Detroit simply because it was his hometown. In such cases, personal factor dominates other consideration. However, this kind of domination is rare. Next is strategic considerations. In modern times, strategic considerations are playing a vital role in determining industrial locations. During wartime, a safe location is assuming special significance. This is because in times of war, the main targets of air attacks would be armament and ammunition factories and industries supplying other commodities which are required for the war. The Russian experience during the Second World War provides an interesting example. Next is external economies. External economies also exert considerable influence on the location of industries. External economies arise due to the growth of specialized subsidiary activities when a particular industry is mainly localized at a particular center with port and shipping facilities. External economies could also be enjoyed when a large number of industrial units in the same industry were located in close proximity to one another. There could be miscellaneous factors as well. Historical incidents also play a dominating role in determining the location of industries in certain cases. The development of the cotton textile industry in Lancashire provides an interesting example for this. Further, the size of an industrial unit would also have much influence in choosing a location. This is because the size of industrial units depends upon the radius of the circle within which they can profitably distribute their goods and upon the density of the population living within circle. So in order to summarize this chapter, we would say that the factory establishment requires well thought of decisions. It cannot be an unplanned decision because there has to be a provision for expansion and relocation of a plant. Because the future expansion is often imminent in the life of business, so it has to be very planned decisions. Moreover, the location of the factory or plant also depends on a large number of factories and factors, so the promoters of the business must evaluate all those factors which are likely available of raw materials, labor, power, infrastructure, suitable climatic conditions, government regulations, etc. That means there are various factors which affects while taking the decision of a plant location. If these factors are not taken into consideration, then that would create a problem for any of the manufacturing concern to survive itself for the long term. Thank you. That's all for this chapter.